legacy systems, banks, insurance companies, large government agencies, they have a lot of algorithms written in COBOL, for example, a lot of data that is formatted in ways that are very, very strange to us today, but this is the way they evolved. It is so costly for them to move to the cloud, and nobody's really figured out a very good economic way for them to move to the cloud. So even though you hear a lot about security concerns and these other concerns, yes, they're very legitimate concerns. I think we will be able to resolve a lot of them. The main concerns for a lot of these enterprises is just economics. So first let me say I had a great fortune to work for the US government, and it's a one giant service organization. Social Security doesn't build anything, it just services. I went in there, I was actually tapped by the Obama administration, and I started an office called Vision and Strategy, and I looked at the entire administrative process for Social Security. So I was not involved at all in the questions you hear in the news. You know, I had nothing to do about, how much, when is the retirement age, the trust fund. That wasn't at all. What I was mainly concerned are the operational efficiencies, and in particular, how IT supports that operation. The first thing I do when I come into a situation like this is I look at how much we spend. It's just the way I've been trained to do. So IT costs at Social Security, by the way, Social Security is about 80,000 people, 65,000 federal employees, and about 15,000 state employees that we pay. It's a pretty big organization. Last year's IT budget was over $1.5 billion. That's out of an $80 billion federal IT budget. It's a pretty big organization. So what I did is I looked at the IT budget for Social Security. I normalized it to account for inflation. And if you look at the decade between 1990 and 2000, things were nice, about $600 million a year, flat. And then Social Security started a modernization effort, nice modernization effort. So everybody was very happy, and the goal was one of two things. Ideally, bring the costs of IT down, but that would have been very far-fetched in a federal bureaucracy, so at least get a lot more services done with the same amount of money, but absolutely not raise our IT budget because we all knew that we were, we all sensed a budget crunch, and of course we're in it terribly right now. Well, what happened the last decade, the last 12 years, is that we were modernizing, and the more we modernized, the more our costs ballooned. And between 2000 and 2011, we skyrocketed from $600 million to $1.5 billion, and things just kept going out of hand. And we were not really delivering better services because of our IT. We were actually delivering better services because we changed policy, but we were not getting the returns for our investment. The question is why? Let me add another part of the picture is what was happening in the entire federal government. About 3 years ago, the White House CIO initiated a modernization initiative. And like I said, when you hear modernization, you get nervous. Part of the modernization initiative was something called the Cloud First Initiative. So the idea was that when you're doing things in IT, think first of how you would do it on the cloud. And they, remember, most of them are not technical people, very few technical people, but they have consultants who are technical people. They did an analysis, and they said, if we do this, we will save $20 billion out of the $80 billion. Everybody was delighted. Everybody was enthusiastically, at least, shouting to support the Cloud First initiative. So I looked at Social Security, and I said, great. Let's see how we can leverage the cloud. By the way, I'm a big believer in the cloud, as a lot of you know. And what I learned is that everywhere I tried to leverage the cloud in Social Security, it just cost me more money, and I was not going to get any results. Maybe if we moved email to the cloud, I could save $1 million, but even there, I probably would lose money because there's an initial cost up front. Our email requirements are not going to grow much more. We're actually going to probably shrink. Everywhere I moved, I could not make it work. So I had to ask, why? Where did the cloud succeed, and what are the challenges? Why can't I make it work? So I went back historically, and where does the cloud succeed? Well, the cloud succeeds fantastically when you're doing media, okay? When you're doing storage of media, Zynga and Netflix and highly multi-tenant single instance applications for consumers, Gmail, Yahoo Mail, phenomenal success. How about in the enterprise? Where do they succeed? They succeed phenomenally well when you have highly scalable multi-tenant single instance applications like Salesforce.com or ADP payroll systems and things like that. They work really, really well. So they might use some virtualization, but virtualization is not a key there. Well, in fact, it is the single instance multi-tenancy that makes it highly scalable. And we didn't have that situation in Social Security. What we have is legacy applications and data buried in legacy systems. Today, we spend 60% of our software costs in doing COBOL programming every time we add a layer because we want to do a modern application. So adding that layer is pretty simple. I mean, software development in a modern environment is pretty simple. And let me tell you, the people in the government are not stupid people. They know how to create software beautifully. But then to tie it back into the legacy application, the more layers you put on, the deeper you got to get, and you have to get deep into the COBOL, and it's painful. And if you're going to move things to the cloud, you're still going to have to tie it back into the legacy application. This was a huge bottleneck. So I went around studying other industries, and I looked for industries that are somewhat similar to what we had at Social Security. I looked at banking, and I looked at life insurance. And guess what? They have exactly the same problem. Okay? So even though you'll hear people saying, we are very concerned about security, that's why we're not moving to the cloud, it is true, but the real reason for the hesitation is because once they start doing the exercise of trying to figure out, does it even make business sense? They don't know how to do it. It is not cost efficient. So for me, that's a grand challenge. I believe a community like us can figure something like this out. What does succeed in the cloud? Well, we know, for example, new stuff succeeds in the cloud. So if you're a new business and you don't have legacy stuff, you can actually start doing something on the Amazon cloud and grow it fantastically well because you don't have this issue of tying it back to the legacy system. So somewhere in the back of our mind is this concept that, you know what, you can't really, oh, by the way, let me tell you what you cannot do. You cannot migrate your applications to the cloud. It will kill you. There's no way you can take these legacy applications and migrate them to the cloud. We did the exercise. We hired IBM to do the exercise. Various other people did that. It is prohibitively costly. Somehow you have to shift your thinking, and the thinking is, well, what works well on the cloud? New things work on the cloud. How do you, literally, if you had to create Social Security from scratch today, how would you do it? Let me tell you, you would do it very differently than the thing you'd be migrating. That in itself, I think, is very doable. I absolutely believe with modern rule-based systems, modern development environments, they're so powerful. Software writing today is so much easier than it used to be. We know that writing complex software applications today in a modern environment is I mean, it's hard, but compared to what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's very, very simple. The challenge is now, what do you do with the legacy data? Let me tell you what you don't do. You don't migrate the legacy data. You will fail. Somehow you have to shift your thinking and ask the question, what is the data that you actually need to carry out your particular required mandate? It's easy in the government, by the way, because we can't, we're not allowed to reinvent our business. We know what we have to do. It's much more challenging in the banking industry or in insurance industry. But that's the challenge I throw to this community is, and by the way, that's where, if you look at the money in computing applications, look where IBM makes its money, look where CA makes its money, look where a lot of the companies make their money. It's these supporting these massive legacy customers. How do you help them leverage the cloud? And I think the way you have to do it is to completely, it's not just build a cloud, you have to start thinking cloud. Thinking cloud is thinking completely different. You don't think like, here's the application, I know how to do it, now I'm going to move it to the cloud. I really think you have to rethink the entire business process from scratch, figure out how that business process goes to the cloud, and then figure out how do you deal with the data from the legacy environment to the cloud. So I throw that as the challenge. Thank you.